Anyone who has worked in customer service, I need to hear your stories down below of a nightmare experience that you had. I've worked retail, I've bartended. What else have I done? I worked at, as you guys know, like fast food. I've done it all. I even like used to be a host in restaurants. So I've had my fair share of customer service experience. And I've dealt with some people. So I want to hear your craziest customer experience story, please. On that note though, drink your water. It's good for you. Cheers. I hope you're having a good day. I used to work at Jimmy John's. They have a policy where they can't take a sandwich back to cut it in half after you've already started eating it. Food safety rules. And will instead give out a plastic knife. This guy got pissed at this rule when I kept offering him a plastic knife and threw his sandwich down on the counter and was like, remake my goddamn sandwich and this time cut it in half. My general manager at the time took the plastic knife, cut it in half, and gave it back to him. Perfect response. If you're not going to use the plastic knife to cut it, that's fine. I'll use the plastic knife and I will cut your sandwich. Here you are. So silly. That is a random rule. Like, I'm trying to think. I guess because your mouth has gone on the sandwich, they don't want to use that knife. I worked in an upscale women's clothing store when I was in school. One morning, as we were preparing the store for opening, my coworker had a literal seizure, like fell on the floor, hit her head on something on the way down, and blood was everywhere. Oh my God. We were waiting for the ambulance, and as this chaos was happening, a woman was banging on the door. I opened it and politely told her that due to an emergency, we may have to open a few minutes late. She went full on Karen and started yelling about how she drove X amount of miles to make a return, and she was very busy. I was not ready to deal with such selfishness on top of the stress of the morning, so I just closed the door, locked it, and walked away. Yeah, even if she kept banging on the door, I would just let her bang on the door. Tire yourself out there, Karen. I have more important things to worry about, like somebody's life. I worked at a supermarket and this one woman threw a bag at me and said, "Do your job." I had no problem bagging people's groceries, but seriously, don't treat me like I'm dirt. If someone threw a bag at me and said, "Do your job," I would lose my job. Let me tell you that right now. That is why I don't work in customer service. Because that whole like, oh, customer's always right, like treat the customer with respect even if they're not respectful toward you. No, see, I don't like that and I don't like following that. I used to work at a very upscale store in a very upscale neighborhood. Ooh, fancy, fancy. We once had a customer come in and release his bowels in a garbage can in our changing room. Ugh. It was the most vile thing I ever smelled in my life. I believe you. To piggyback on that, I had a friend who worked at a tanning salon in the same area. After a customer left, she went to go clean the bed and shook out the towel they had left behind, and a huge piece of poo flew out. Again, so gross. Not sure how people can just leave themselves anywhere. No, not sure why they would, because these establishments have bathrooms. Even if, God forbid, an emergency happened, you had an accident, why would you leave the towel there? Like, God forbid, let's just put myself, let's say I had a very tragic accident where I had to poop in a towel. I'm not leaving that towel for an employee. Let me tell you that. I will take that towel, put it in my bag, and go outside and deal with it myself.
Good for you.
I don't even want, why am I talking about this? During the holidays at my first retail job, I was the only cashier for a while and had a line all the way to the back of the store. That is the worst. Retail during holidays? Most of the customers were pretty understanding since they saw that I was the only one. But I had one lady come up and try to use a coupon on a giant bottle of shampoo that was already on discount. And I kindly explained to her that unfortunately it would not work on that item and that she could use that coupon another time. This lady lost it, screamed the F word at me several times, called me stupid, and then proceeded to throw the giant shampoo at me before storming out. All for some freaking shampoo. I stood there in shock because I was just smacked in the head and chest with a heavy shampoo. I will say the customers after her were incredibly nice and asked if I was all right. Retail is such fun around that time of year. Yeah, retail sucks, honestly, most of the year. If I'm being for real, that's just my experience and my opinion.
Sounds controversial.
But especially the holidays. I've had to work Boxing Day. I've had to work Christmas Eve. I've had to work all the holidays in retail before. Brutal. Also, Since she threw that and literally like hit you in the head and chest with that, could you not like press charges? Like, that's pretty messed up. I worked at Walmart for a couple years after college, primarily the customer service desk. So I had my fair share of horrible customers. I can only imagine what that desk has to deal with at Walmart. The worst was not one of the ones who yelled. No, the worst was the woman who insisted on returning a used pregnancy test without a box or receipt because it didn't work. My shift manager at the time made me process the return because she didn't have the time to deal with an angry customer should the customer begin yelling. Also, I was not provided with gloves. I had to process that return with my bare hands. That's disgusting. No absolute chance. If my manager's willing to do that, I'm gonna say, then you touch it. You make the return and you touch the pee stick. I get how annoying it would be to purchase a pregnancy test and then when it's like inconclusive, it's total waste of money and you're like, are you freaking kidding me? But you can't return it. You peed on it. I worked retail and customer service for over 25 years. Well, bless your soul, you honestly deserve a plaque for that. Once when I was the only cashier working and had a long line of people, I finished ringing up a lady and started to move on to the next customer. But then she very loudly said, "Excuse me, but you overcharged me." I was halfway through the next customer's items, but I took a moment to check her receipt and I couldn't see anything wrong. She said, "You overcharged me on the spice. That's not supposed to be any tax." I realized she's actually talking about 4 cents.
Money for a down payment.
I was way too busy to run it through the register to give her 4 cents. So I reached in my pocket and came up with a dime. I handed it to her and after telling her to have a nice day, I got back to helping the next person. The next morning, she called the store manager and told him that I had threatened her and she really feared for her safety. And yes, even though it was ridiculous, I got written up for it. See, that's the worst part about customer service is that when your boss and the people above you don't have your back or support you. Especially in situations like this, when you actually handled it, gave her more than just 4 cents back out of your own pocket. I used to work at a certain major retailer as a phone and computer tech. I've seen customers throw cups of coffee at people approaching the desk with nosebleeds, been yelled at by someone who had, I don't think I can say this, but illegal substance, white powder, all over her nose, and threatened by a customer that was my firstborn would, wait, what? And threatened by a customer that my firstborn would be his if I didn't get him what he wanted. Ew! Why are people crazy? I've seen all kinds of tantrums thrown by grown people, including this awful woman who came in right before closing when everyone was gone, demanding help and threatening to throw 2 of my coworkers off the 2nd floor balcony. Oh my God. Instead of escorting her out, the manager sat her down and talked to her as if she was there for a therapy session. I'm so glad the idea of the customer's always right and the nightmare managers who allow this stuff are finally beginning to be questioned and rejected by society. This is what I was talking about. When someone is blatantly wrong or being disrespected, do you have your employees back? Or do you go by, nope, I gotta side with the customer for the sake of my business? That's the big dilemma. I used to work for Sears Jewelry right out of college. Oh my God, I miss Sears. We had a Sears in my hometown and like during COVID, it shut down completely, like bankrupt. I don't know, it's gone. I liked Sears. Once a customer came in and demanded that I fix her gold anklet that broke. We didn't actually fix the jewelry at the counter, but I asked if she had purchased one of the 2 protection plans, one that allowed us to ship it to a local jeweler to be fixed, or the other that allowed either a replacement or a refund. I went to grab the receipt to see if she had, and before I could look at it, she ripped it from my hands and proceeded to take a swing at my face. I dodged out of the way before she could punch me, but then she started screaming at me and calling me every 4-letter word in the book. I was shaking, but went back to the register where another customer had witnessed the whole thing. He just looked at me and said, "They don't pay you enough for this crap." No, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, you don't get paid enough for that. Don't get paid enough to be freaking swung at. Imagine she would have landed the punch. No, I'm not gonna say. I'm not even gonna say what I was thinking. I'm not. I'm I'm going to choose Jesus today. I worked at a swimsuit store and an angry woman stormed up to my coworker who was behind the register. The woman was angry because her daughter's swimsuit got damaged within an hour of wearing it. My coworker told her calmly that she herself could not handle her request due to company policy, but gave her a business card to contact the customer service desk in the store's corporate office. The woman would not take no for an answer and immediately started screaming. She yelled out several racial slurs at my coworker, who is black, calling her stupid and a lost cause, and ended her 90-second rant by telling my coworker to go back to Africa. I hate that people like this exist in the same universe as us, honestly. She made the woman give her name and contact info so that she would be banned from all stores' locations. Thank God. That just pisses me off. I'm not even gonna say anything more. I liked my retail job, I just hated the customers. I remember being called stupid by a customer for not knowing which of our other 4 stores were closest to the store I worked at when checking for more stock of an item. Truth be told, the 3 were all about the same distance. Since the guy called me stupid and was an a-hole every single time he came into the store, I told him his best bet was the store that had just moved up past one of the largest malls on the East Coast on a Saturday afternoon between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I could have sent him to another store, but I sent him to the one that would guarantee the worst traffic unimaginable. It would normally have been a 15-minute drive, but that day, probably closer to an hour. I am not stupid, but I am petty. The managers refused to intervene when he would treat the employees like crap, so we all just took turns telling them we all would not deal with him in the future. That was one of my favorite things about... Not my favorite things, that's so dramatic. But when I worked at Tim Hortons, we had these regular customers and some of them were awful to deal with. So when we saw them coming in, we would all do nose goes, where you touch your nose and the last one to touch your nose. They had to serve that customer. They were just brutal every time, and we knew like we were gonna be disrespected and talked to in a really crappy manner. So we'd all, if we saw them coming out of their car, we're like, nose goes! And then the last person had to do it. That was quick. Let me tell you. Let me know your stories, you guys. I am getting out of here. Stay classy out there. Stay sassy. And if you still work in customer service, my hat is off to you. I could never do it anymore. I couldn't do it back then. I still can't. Not for me.